Let me hit you with a story that will bend your brain. Everyone feared and ran away from the Billionaire'S Rottweiler. Then a black maid did something unbelievable. Everyone's running for their lives. The billionaire himself is yelling for someone to shoot his own dog. Then the black maid nobody ever notices slips past the chaos, puts her unprotected hand inches from those razor fangs, and the Rottweiler that was seconds from ripping throats freezes. Because what she does next shatters every single person watching. Everyone at the Ashford estate knew one rule: stay away from the kennel. The billionaire's 140-pound Rottweiler had sent 3 security guards to the hospital, destroyed 2 reinforced gates, and bitten through a trainer's protective sleeve so viciously the man swore he'd never work with dogs again. No one could get near Titan without risking their life. Not the groundskeeper, not the security team, not even Jonathan Ashford himself. So when the security monitors showed the estate's newest housekeeper walking toward the kennel one Thursday evening, the head of security nearly had a heart attack. She stood there, a 52-year-old black woman in a simple gray uniform, staring through the chain-link fence at 140 pounds of pure rage. Titan's lips pulled back. His teeth gleamed in the dim light. His massive frame coiled like a spring ready to explode. But Clara Bennett didn't run. She didn't scream. She just tilted her head slightly and whispered something so quietly the security cameras couldn't pick it up. Titan's growl faltered. His ears twitched forward. And then, in a moment that made every staff member watching the monitors freeze in disbelief, the Rottweiler who had terrorized the estate for 2 years slowly lowered himself to the ground and whimpered like a lost puppy. What Clara did next, and the secret she revealed about Titan's past, would expose a truth that Jonathan Ashford had spent millions trying to bury, and it would bring his billion-dollar empire crashing down. 3 weeks earlier, the Ashford estate sprawled across 20 acres of Connecticut waterfront, a monument to wealth accumulated through 3 generations of real estate development and venture capital. Behind iron gates and surveillance systems that tracked every movement, the mansion stood as a fortress of privilege. Inside, imported marble gleamed under crystal fixtures, and artwork worth millions lined walls that had witnessed more secrets than most people could imagine. But none of those secrets were as dangerous as the one that lived in the South Kennel. Jonathan Ashford III had inherited not just his grandfather's fortune, but his ruthless business instincts and his unshakable belief that everything, including loyalty, could be purchased at the right price. At 50, he commanded a portfolio worth $3.2 billion. Politicians returned his calls within minutes. Business rivals knew better than to cross him. Yet there was one creature on his property that Jonathan himself couldn't control. Titan had arrived 2 years earlier, purchased from an exclusive breeder who specialized in protection dogs for the ultra-wealthy. The Rottweiler came with an impressive pedigree, professional training certifications, and a price tag of $50,000. Jonathan had wanted the ultimate symbol of power and protection rolled into one magnificent animal. Instead, he got a nightmare. Within the first week, Titan had bitten David, the groundskeeper, who'd simply tried to pet him. The man still carried scars on his forearm and refused to work anywhere near the south end of the property. By the second month, Titan had broken through his reinforced kennel door 3 times. Security footage showed him pacing for hours, his powerful frame radiating barely contained violence. Professional trainers came and went like doomed expeditions. The first lasted 47 minutes before Titan cornered him against the fence, snarling with such ferocity that the man climbed a nearby tree and refused to come down until security brought a ladder. By the time the 7th trainer quit, word had spread through the elite dog training community. Titan was damaged beyond repair. The beast destroyed furniture when allowed near the mansion. He once bit clean through a solid oak chair leg when a maid dropped a serving spoon during an outdoor dinner party. His bark could shatter the peace of the entire estate. His growl made ex-military security personnel instinctively reach for weapons they no longer carried. Even Jonathan kept his distance, viewing his $50,000 investment as a failed experiment he was too proud to euthanize and too stubborn to rehome. The dog had become his most embarrassing secret. Here was a man who controlled billion-dollar deals with a single signature, who could crush competitors without breaking stride. Yet he couldn't tame one Rottweiler. The estate staff developed elaborate protocols to survive Titan's presence. Thomas, the head butler who'd served the Ashford family for 30 years, created detailed rotation charts ensuring no one worked near the kennel alone. The landscaping crew flatly refused to maintain gardens within 50 feet of Titan's domain. Robert, the head of security, installed 3 additional cameras around the south kennel, not to monitor intruders, but to track the dog's movements so everyone could avoid crossing his path. New staff members received stern warnings during orientation. The south kennel is off limits. The dog there is dangerous, unpredictable. Stay away. But Jonathan couldn't bring himself to get rid of the animal. Deep beneath his polished exterior, he recognized something in Titan's fierce independence. The dog answered to no one, feared nothing, commanded space through pure intimidation. In a strange way, Titan embodied everything Jonathan had spent decades building in himself. It was both infuriating and oddly impressive. On quiet evenings, Jonathan would stand on his office balcony overlooking the south grounds, watching Titan pace his enclosure like a caged predator. The billionaire would sip expensive scotch and wonder what thoughts ran through the animal's mind. Here was a creature that his money couldn't buy, his reputation couldn't intimidate, and his will couldn't bend. As months turned into years, Titan's legend grew. Delivery drivers heard warnings from security. Visiting business associates were quietly steered toward entrances on the opposite side of the estate. The dog had become part of the mansion's dark mythology, a living symbol of unpredictable danger lurking behind the beautiful facade. But legends, no matter how fearsome, can be shattered by the most unexpected forces. Clara Bennett arrived on a Monday morning in early October. She stepped out of the agency car carrying a single suitcase, her gray uniform pressed and proper, her expression calm and professional. At 52, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent decades making herself invisible in wealthy households. Thomas met her at the service entrance, clipboard in hand. The head butler was 60s, British, precise in every movement. He'd been managing the Ashford estate since before Clara was born, and his standards were exacting. "Miss Bennett, welcome to the Ashford estate." His tone was formal but not unkind. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Yes." "Thank you." "Excellent. Let me show you to your quarters, and then we'll begin orientation." As they walked through the pristine kitchen, past the formal dining room, Clara took in every detail. The imported fixtures, the artwork, the carefully maintained silence that money could buy. She'd worked in houses like this before. Boston, Philadelphia. Always the same wealth. Always the same secrets hiding behind polished surfaces. Thomas led her through the protocols, work schedules, staff hierarchy, Mr. Ashford's preferences, the usual rules of domestic invisibility. Then his expression changed, darkened. "There's one final matter." He paused at a window overlooking the south grounds. "That kennel you see in the distance, you are never, under any circumstances, to go near it." Clara followed his gaze. Through the window, she could just make out a chain-link enclosure partially hidden by landscaping. "The dog housed there is extremely dangerous," Thomas continued. "He's attacked multiple people. 3 security guards required hospitalization. 7 professional trainers have failed to manage him. Mr. Ashford keeps him contained, but the animal is unpredictable. Violent. Clara nodded politely, but her eyes remained fixed on the distant kennel. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? Memory? Thomas couldn't quite read it. Miss Bennet, I need to be absolutely clear. That dog is pure evil. Stay away. Do you understand? I understand, Clara said softly. But as Thomas turned to continue the tour, Clara's gaze lingered on the kennel. Her hands, which had been steady all morning, trembled slightly. And for just a moment, something in her carefully composed expression cracked. She'd seen dogs like Titan before. She knew exactly what that kind of aggression meant, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that she wouldn't be able to stay away. Clara's first 2 weeks at the Ashford estate passed in careful silence. She was assigned to the West Wing, guest bedrooms that rarely saw guests, a library where no one read, a dining room used only for business dinners, where conversation died the moment she entered to refill water glasses. The work was familiar. Dust the surfaces, polish the silver, maintain the illusion of perfection. She kept to herself during staff meals, responding politely when spoken to, but never initiating conversation. The other employees noticed her habits. Sarah, the young maid who cleaned the East Wing, whispered to David the groundskeeper that the new housekeeper hummed old gospel hymns while she worked. Slow, mournful melodies that seemed to come from some deep, private place. Margaret, the cook, noticed how Clara would pause at windows, staring out across the grounds as if searching for something she'd lost. Her hands would still on whatever surface she was cleaning, her eyes distant. What none of them knew was what Clara's impeccable references from Boston and Philadelphia families didn't mention. That she'd grown up in rural Georgia, where her family had run a small animal shelter that specialized in rehabilitating abused and abandoned dogs. That she'd learned to read trauma in an animal's eyes before she learned to read books. That she'd spent her childhood coaxing broken creatures back to trust. What they couldn't know was that 15 years ago, that shelter had burned to the ground under circumstances the local fire marshal had ruled suspicious but never proven. That her son, Michael, 23 years old and a volunteer firefighter, had run back into the flames to save the dog still trapped inside. That the roof had collapsed before he could get out. That they'd found his body shielding 8 terrified animals who'd survived because of his sacrifice. Clara had been running from that grief ever since. Boston for 8 months, Philadelphia for 10, a private estate in Vermont for 6. Never staying long enough for the memories to catch up. Never working with animals again because the pain was too sharp, too immediate. She'd sworn she would never touch another traumatized dog as long as she lived. But on her 15th day at the Ashford estate, that promise shattered. She was carrying fresh linens through the garden path, mentally cataloguing her remaining tasks for the day when she heard it. A sound that made her stop mid-step, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. It came from the direction of the south kennel, cutting through Titan's aggressive barking like a knife. A low, pained whine, desperate, anguished. Clara knew that sound. She'd heard it hundreds of times at her family's shelter. It was the sound of an animal that had been hurt so badly, so systematically, that rage was the only language it remembered. But underneath the aggression was something else. A plea for help that the animal itself no longer understood how to voice. Mama, hurt dogs sound angry, but they're really just scared. You taught me that. Michael's voice in her memory, clear as the October afternoon around her. He'd been 16, working alongside her to rehabilitate a pit bull someone had used for fighting. The dog had lunged at them 3 times before finally breaking down and letting Michael touch his scarred head. They're not mean. They just forgot how to be anything else. Clara's hands trembled on the linens. She should walk away. She should finish her shift, go to her quarters, and forget what she'd heard. That was the safe choice. the sane choice. She made it through the rest of her duties on autopilot, her mind replaying that whine over and over. By the time her shift officially ended at 6, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the estate in amber light. Clara set down her cleaning supplies in the utility closet, smoothed her gray uniform, and walked toward the south kennel. In the security office, Robert saw her on the monitors and grabbed his radio. "Thomas, we have a situation. The new housekeeper is approaching the kennel." Thomas's voice crackled back, sharp with alarm. "Stop her! Someone stop her now!" David, who'd been trimming hedges near the west gardens, heard the radio chatter and started running. Sarah dropped the laundry basket she'd been carrying. Margaret came to the kitchen window, hands pressed against the glass. But Clara was already at the fence. Titan exploded into motion. 140 pounds of muscle and rage launched at the chain-link barrier with such force that the metal rattled. His barking was deafening, echoing across the grounds. His lips pulled back to reveal teeth designed to tear through bone. His eyes glowed with feral intensity in the fading light. The security team raced across the lawn, shouting warnings. Clara lowered herself to the ground. Slowly, deliberately, she sat cross-legged in the grass, making herself smaller, less threatening. Her hands rested gently in her lap. She didn't try to reach through the fence, didn't make sudden movements, didn't speak. Instead, she began to hum. It was an old gospel hymn her grandmother had taught her as a child, a melody about troubled waters and safe harbors. She'd hummed it to countless traumatized dogs at the shelter, letting the sound calm them when words couldn't reach. She'd hummed it on the worst days, when animals came in so broken she wasn't sure they'd ever heal. Michael had been humming that same song the day he died. She'd heard it as he ran back into the burning shelter, choosing the dogs over his own safety. She hadn't been able to listen to it since. But now, sitting in the grass with 140 pounds of rage snarling at her through chain link, the melody came back as naturally as breathing. Titan's barking didn't stop, but something shifted. Titan's ears, which had been flat against his skull in pure aggression, began to lift. Just slightly. Just enough. Clara kept humming, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She didn't look directly at him. Didn't try to assert dominance or show fear. She just sat there, offering the only thing she had, patient presence. Minutes passed. Titan's barking faded to growls. The growls became uncertain whines. His massive body, which had been coiled to attack, began to relax incrementally. Finally, he sat, his head tilted as he studied this strange human who showed no fear and asked for nothing. "That's it," Clara murmured, still not making eye contact. "You remember, don't you? Someone used to be kind to you, before all the bad things happened." She leaned slightly closer to the fence, still humming between words. "I see those scars on your neck. Deep ones, like chains cut into you. I see how you favor your left front leg, like someone kicked it until it didn't heal right. I see how you flinch when anyone moves too fast." Her voice remained soft, almost conversational. "Someone hurt you bad, didn't they? Someone who was supposed to protect you. Someone who took a puppy and turned him into this." Titan's eyes, which had been hard with rage, began to soften. A sound emerged from deep in his chest. Not a growl. Something that sounded almost like recognition. Clara reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small dog treat she'd brought from her own supplies. She placed it on the ground near the fence and backed away. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "You take your time. Whenever you're ready to trust again, I'll be right here." She resumed humming, letting the melody fill the space between them. Behind her, the security team had stopped 20 feet away, frozen in disbelief. David stood with his mouth open. Sarah had her phone out, recording. Robert kept his hand near his radio, ready to call for emergency protocols. But Clara didn't acknowledge them. Her entire focus remained on the traumatized animal in front of her. As darkness fell and the estate's exterior lights flickered on, Clara continued to sit. Titan continued to watch. And slowly, impossibly, the distance between them began to close. Thomas found them at midnight. He'd been checking the security monitors one last time before bed when he saw Clara still at the fence. Concerned she'd fallen asleep or been injured, he'd grabbed a flashlight and walked down to the kennel, prepared to call for medical assistance. What he discovered made him question everything he thought he understood about the supposedly vicious dog. Titan lay pressed against the chain link from the inside as close as he could get to Clara. Clara sat pressed against it from the outside, her uniform grass-stained and damp with evening dew. And between them, pushed through the gaps in the fence, was Clara's hand. Titan's massive head rested gently in her palm while she stroked his scarred muzzle and sang softly in the darkness. Thomas stopped, afraid to break whatever spell had been cast. Clara looked up, tears tracking down her dark cheeks. This dog doesn't need training. He needs healing. He's been hurt so many times, he forgot what kindness feels like. How? Thomas managed, his voice barely a whisper. 7 professional trainers. Didn't understand what they were looking at. Clara interrupted gently. She traced a scar on Titan's neck with her thumb. These marks? They're not from accidents or rough play. Someone chained him, probably used electric shock collars for training. Maybe worse. I've seen dogs like Titan before. Dogs that came from fighting rings, kill training operations, punishment breeding programs. Thomas felt sick. Mr. Ashford paid $50,000 for him. The breeder had certificates, credentials, documentation. Then that breeder lied, Clara said flatly. This level of trauma doesn't come from legitimate breeding operations. This is systematic abuse. Months or years of it. She met Thomas's eyes. And I think your Mr. Ashford knew exactly what he was buying. The accusation hung in the night air between them. Over the next 3 days, Clara spent every free moment with Titan. She brought him special food, purchased with her own money from a pet supply store 20 minutes away. She sat with him for hours, speaking in low, soothing tones, singing those old gospel hymns. She moved slowly, predictably, never startling him. By the 4th day, she entered the kennel. The staff gathered at windows and on balconies, watching in horror, certain they were about to witness a tragedy. But Titan simply approached Clara, sniffed her hand, and allowed her to stroke his head. By the 5th day, Titan followed her around the grounds like a shadow. He remained calm only in her presence, but with Clara nearby, he was transformed, gentle, obedient, almost puppy-like in his devotion. The staff reactions ranged from amazement to suspicion. Sarah whispered to anyone who'd listen that it was witchcraft, that Clara had used some kind of dark magic. David quietly suggested maybe they'd all just given up on Titan too quickly, that patience was something none of them had tried. Margaret noticed Clara crying after her sessions with Titan, her shoulders shaking with silent grief. Robert, methodical as always, pulled up old security footage of Titan's arrival 2 years earlier. He watched the unmarked van, the nervous driver who refused to linger, the way Titan had cowered in the transport crate. Something about it didn't align with the story of an elite protection dog from a reputable breeder. From his office window, Jonathan Ashford watched his failed investment transform. He felt simultaneous relief and unease. Titan's change was remarkable, impressive even. but it raised uncomfortable questions. If this housekeeper could rehabilitate the dog in less than a week, what did that say about the animal's origins? What did it say about the $50,000 purchase he'd made without proper vetting? Late one night, Clara sat in the kitchen, exhausted from another long session with Titan. Her muscles ached from sitting on the ground for hours. Her voice was hoarse from singing. Margaret poured her tea without asking and sat down across from her. "Why do you care so much about that dog?" Clara stared into her cup. "Because 15 years ago, I couldn't save the ones that mattered." The story came out slowly. The shelter, the fire, Michael running back inside, the way his choice had saved 8 lives and ended his own. "So you're saving Titan to save yourself?" Margaret asked gently. "No." Clara's voice was firm. "I'm saving him because nobody else will, and because he deserves better than what he's gotten. Every creature does." The phone on the kitchen wall rang, shrill in the quiet. Margaret answered, listened, then held it out to Clara, her expression unreadable. "It's Mr. Ashford's assistant. He's requesting a meeting with you tomorrow morning. His office, 8 o'clock sharp." Clara took the phone with steady hands, but her heart raced. She'd known this moment would come. She'd known that healing Titan would force uncomfortable truths into the light. "Tell him I'll be there," she said. And as she hung up, she thought about Michael's voice one more time. "Mama, the truth is scary, but hiding from it just makes the hurt last longer. Tomorrow, she would make Jonathan Ashford face the truth about what he'd brought onto his property, and she would make sure that truth led to justice." At precisely 8 o'clock, Clara stood outside Jonathan Ashford's private study. The door was solid mahogany, imported from somewhere expensive. Everything in this house was imported from somewhere expensive. She knocked twice. "Enter!" The study was exactly what she expected. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes that had never been opened. A desk that cost more than most people's cars. Windows overlooking the estate's manicured grounds. The air smelled of old money and older secrets. Jonathan Ashford sat behind his desk, every inch the billionaire. Mid-50s, handsome in that polished way wealth could buy, with calculating eyes that measured every person as either asset or obstacle. "Miss Bennet, please, sit." He gestured to a chair across from him. Clara remained standing. "You wanted to see me?" A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, quickly smoothed away. "You've done something remarkable with Titan. In less than a week, you've accomplished what 7 professional trainers couldn't manage in 2 years. I helped a traumatized animal, that's all." "Modest." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "I'd like to make you an offer. Continue working with Titan. Make him permanently manageable. I'll pay you a $10,000 bonus on top of your salary." Clara's expression didn't change. "He doesn't need fixing. He needs truth." "Excuse me?" "Someone abused that dog." Clara's voice remained steady, but her eyes hardened. "Systematically, professionally. Those scars aren't from rough training or accidents." Jonathan's face went carefully blank. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm saying that Breeder lied to you, Mr. Ashford. Those aren't training scars, they're torture scars." She pulled out her phone, swiped through photos she'd taken over the past few days, stepped forward and placed the phone on his expensive desk. "Electric burn patterns on his flanks and neck. See the spacing? That's from shock collars used repeatedly in the same spots. These chain abrasions go deep into the tissue, which means he was restrained for extended periods. And these?" She zoomed in on Titan's shoulder. "Bite marks from other dogs, multiple animals, fighting ring injuries." Jonathan stared at the photos, his expression unreadable. "This is a fighting dog, Mr. Ashford. or was being trained as one before someone sold him to you. I paid $50,000 through legitimate channels. Jonathan's voice went cold. He opened a drawer, pulled out a thick folder, and spread documents across the desk. Pedigree papers, health certificates, training records. The breeder was Elite Canine Solutions, a prestigious operation that supplies protection dogs to executives worldwide. Clara picked up the papers, examined them carefully. The letterhead looked professional. The signatures appeared authentic, but something about the documents felt wrong, too perfect, too uniform. These could be forged. That's a serious accusation. So is selling abused fighting dogs to unsuspecting buyers. A knock at the door interrupted them. Robert, the head of security, entered with his laptop. "Mr. Ashford, you asked me to pull up Titan's delivery records." "And?" Robert set the laptop on the desk, turned it so they both could see. Security footage from 2 years ago played on screen. An unmarked white van pulling up to the service entrance. A nervous driver in plain clothes hurrying to unload a transport crate. No company logos. No professional equipment. The driver practically ran back to his van after Titan was unloaded. "That's not Elite Canine Solutions protocol," Robert said. "I called 3 similar operations. They all use branded vehicles, professional handlers, detailed transfer procedures. This looks like someone trying not to be identified." Jonathan's jaw tightened. He picked up his phone, dialed a number from the breeder documentation. The phone rang, and rang. Then, "This number has been disconnected." He tried the website listed on the letterhead. Error message, page not found. Robert pulled up archived web data. Elite Canine Solutions website was taken down 18 months ago. The business address on file is an abandoned warehouse in Newark. No forwarding information. Jonathan's face had gone pale. "Someone set me up." "Or," Clara said quietly, "you bought a dog from an illegal operation and didn't ask enough questions." His eyes snapped to her, angry now. "I did my due diligence. You saw expensive paperwork and assumed it was legitimate. Fighting rings breed dogs, train them brutally, then wash them through fake businesses. They sell to wealthy buyers who want aggressive protection but don't want scrutiny. The buyer gets a traumatized animal, the breeder disappears with the money, and everyone pretends it never happened." Jonathan stood, paced to the window. Clara could see him calculating, weighing options, considering consequences. "If I admit to buying an illegal fighting dog, there are legal ramifications. My competitors would use this against me. Business partners would question my judgment." He turned back to her. "But if I keep Titan without addressing his origin, I'm complicit in animal abuse." "That dog deserves justice," Clara said. "The people who hurt him deserve consequences. You can help me find them, or I'll do it myself." "And go to the authorities?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "I don't trust authorities. They shut down my family's shelter on technicalities while letting puppy mills operate freely. I handle things my own way." Something shifted in Jonathan's expression. Recognition, perhaps, of someone equally willing to operate outside conventional rules. "Fine," he said finally. "We find the truth. Together. But carefully. Robert, start tracing." Over the next hour, Robert worked his contacts. The paper trail led to a Delaware shell company that had dissolved 6 months after Titan's sale. Payment records had been scrubbed, but Robert found a gap. A wire transfer from Ashford's account had gone to an intermediary. That intermediary had paid a consultation fee to a larger corporation. When the corporation name appeared on screen, Robert went still. "Kraus International Holdings." Clara's coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Thomas, who'd been summoned to the meeting, looked at her in alarm. "Miss Bennett?" "Victor Kraus." Her voice came out strangled. "The board member." "You know him?" Jonathan asked. Clara's face had gone ashen. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the desk. Victor Krauss ran the operation that burned down my family's shelter 15 years ago. Her eyes met Jonathan's, and he saw something terrible in them. Pure, focused rage. He killed my son. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. Tell me everything, Jonathan said quietly. Clara stood at the window, her back to the room, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Georgia, 2008. My family ran a small animal shelter outside Atlanta. The Bennett family animal shelter. Just me, my husband James, and our son Michael. Her voice was steady, but Jonathan could hear the carefully controlled grief beneath each word. We specialized in rescuing fighting dogs, abuse cases, the ones other shelters wouldn't touch because they were too damaged, too dangerous, too expensive to rehabilitate. We took them all in. She turned to face them. We got good at it. Too good. Started exposing the breeding rings that supplied the fighting operations. Testified at 3 trials. Got 2 operations shut down. Saved maybe 200 dogs over 5 years. That's when the threat started? Robert asked. Clara nodded. Small things at first. Anonymous calls telling us to mind our business. Then they left dead animals on our property. Mutilated. Messages, really. Then the calls got specific. Names. Addresses, where Michael went to school. You went to the police, Thomas said. We tried. They said there wasn't enough evidence for protection. Said we should stop antagonizing the community. Her voice dripped contempt. James said we had evidence. Documents, photos, veterinary records linking specific dogs to specific operations. Said we'd bring them all down. She moved back to the desk, her hands flat on its surface. Victor Krauss. That's the name we kept finding. He ran it all. Had a legitimate business front called Premium Pet Services. Luxury boarding, training, breeding. But really, he coordinated an underground network. Breeding operations in 4 states, fighting rings in 6 cities, illegal sales to buyers who didn't ask questions. And your shelter was exposing him, Jonathan said. Every dog we rescued carried evidence. Scars, training patterns, genetic markers. We were building a case. The FBI was finally starting to listen. Clara's eyes went distant. Then, October 15th, 2008, someone decided we'd exposed too much. The room waited. Fire started just after midnight, in the kennels. Investigators found accelerant residue later, but that was buried in the final report. We had 47 dogs in the shelter that night. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. Michael woke up first, heard the barking. He was 23, volunteered with the fire department, knew what to do, ran out there before James or I were fully awake. Got 12 dogs out, came back for his 3rd trip, and James tried to stop him, physically tried to hold him back. Clara's hands clenched into fists. Michael said, I can hear them, Dad. They're scared. Pulled away and ran back inside. The roof collapsed 30 seconds later. Thomas made a small sound of horror. Took 3 days to make the structure safe enough to recover bodies. Found Michael in the east kennel. He'd shielded 8 dogs with his own body. They survived. He didn't. No one spoke. Outside, birds sang, oblivious to the weight of grief filling the room. The investigation ruled it an accidental electrical fire, Clara continued. Faulty wiring in an old building. Case closed. But I knew. I knew it was Krauss. He had connections everywhere. Police, fire marshal, county judges, all bought or intimidated. Your husband? Jonathan asked quietly. James became a broken man. Lost his son, lost his purpose. Had a heart attack 2 years later. Doctors said it was genetic. I know it was grief. She looked directly at Jonathan. I spent the next decade trying to find evidence against Kraus. Moved from city to city, worked where his network operated, watched, waited, but he was too careful, too protected. Until now, Robert said. Until Titan. Clara's expression hardened into something fierce. The scars, the training patterns, the specific trauma responses, they match Kraus's methods exactly. I've seen enough dogs from his operations to recognize the signature. Jonathan understood now. Titan is a direct link to his network. If I can trace Titan's origin properly, microchip registration, genetic markers, veterinary records, compare his injuries to other documented fighting dogs, build a case that proves he came from Kraus's operation. Proving Kraus abused one dog won't bring down his empire, Robert pointed out. No, Clara agreed. But it's a thread. Pull it hard enough, the whole thing unravels. One dog leads to a breeding facility. That facility leads to others. Financial records, transport routes, buyers. She looked at Jonathan. Including you. Jonathan's face remained impassive, but Clara saw the calculation behind his eyes. She'd seen it in enough wealthy men to recognize it instantly. Kraus is your business rival, she said. It wasn't a question. We've competed for real estate deals, investor relationships. He's cost me millions over the years. Jonathan's admission was careful. Taking him down would certainly benefit me. But the methods I might use could expose you too. Yes. And you're trying to decide if that's a risk worth taking. Jonathan smiled slightly. A predator's smile. Miss Bennett, I've built a fortune on calculated risks. The question isn't whether to act, it's how to act strategically. Robert cleared his throat. There's more. I found the connection between Titan and Kraus. 5 years ago, you partnered with Kraus International on a development project in Boston. Mixed-use complex, $200 million budget. The Waterfront Towers project, Jonathan said. It failed, cost both of us significant capital. According to the documents, Kraus offered you a settlement. In lieu of litigation, he'd provide you with a premium protection dog from his exclusive breeding contacts. The pieces clicked into place. Clara saw it on Jonathan's face. He deliberately gave you an unmanageable animal, she said. Revenge, humiliation, made you look weak to your own staff. I didn't know what I was accepting. Jonathan's voice was tight. But I should have asked more questions. You treated a living creature as a business transaction, Clara said, disgust evident in her tone. That's what enabled this. Yes. Jonathan didn't flinch from the accusation. So now I make it right. What do you need? I need to take Titan to a veterinarian I trust, Dr. Patricia Hughes. She's 60, runs a clinic in Maryland. She's helped run an underground railroad for abused animals for 30 years. Does off-books examinations, no questions asked. If anyone can properly document Titan's injuries and trace his origins, it's her. Jonathan nodded. Robert will drive you. There's a risk, Clara said. Going after Kraus means exposing your involvement. He has resources, connections. People who challenge him tend to disappear. Are you concerned for your safety? Jonathan asked. Clara's laugh was hollow. I should have fought harder 15 years ago. If I had, Michael would still be alive. I don't care what happens to me now. Then we move forward. Robert was already making arrangements when his phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, pulled up new security footage on his laptop. Mr. Ashford, we have a problem. He turned the screen. Footage from the front gate showed a black SUV parked across the street. Tinted windows. No visible license plates. It's been there for 3 days, Robert said. I pulled footage from Miss Bennett's previous employment in Philadelphia. Same vehicle was spotted outside that residence multiple times last month. Clara felt ice slide down her spine. "Someone's been following you," Thomas said quietly. Clara walked to the window, looked out toward the distant gates. Somewhere beyond them, that black SUV waited, watching. "Kraus knows I'm here," she said, her voice deadly calm. "He knows I found Titan." She turned back to face them, and her expression made Jonathan realize he'd underestimated this woman. She wasn't just grief-stricken. She was dangerous. "Good," Clara said. "Let him watch. Let him worry. Because 15 years ago, I was too scared to fight him properly. I'm not scared anymore." Dr. Patricia Hughes' clinic sat at the end of a winding dirt road in rural Connecticut, deliberately unmarked and difficult to find. The building looked like an ordinary farmhouse from the outside. Inside, it was equipped with veterinary facilities that rivaled any hospital. Hughes was in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with hands that moved with practiced precision. She took one look at Titan and knew exactly what she was seeing. "How long have you had him?" she asked Clara. 5 days. But he's been at the estate for 2 years. And before that? That's what we need you to help us find out. The examination took 3 hours. Hughes sedated Titan carefully, then worked methodically, documenting every scar, every old injury, every sign of trauma. Robert filmed everything on his phone. Jonathan stood against the wall, watching in silence, his face growing harder with each revelation. "Multiple healed fractures in the ribs," Hughes said, her voice clinical, but her eyes angry. "They healed wrong, which means they weren't treated, just left to mend on their own. This pattern here suggests repeated blunt force trauma. Kicks, most likely." She moved to Titan's legs. Left foreleg shows signs of a badly healed break. Right hind leg has scar tissue throughout the muscle. This dog was injured repeatedly and never given proper care. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. Hughes examined Titan's neck and flanks. "These burn patterns. Electric shock collars used extensively. See the spacing? This wasn't training. This was punishment conditioning. They shocked him over and over in the same spots until the tissue scarred." "Dear God," Thomas murmured. "The bite scars are extensive," Hughes continued. "Different sizes, different depths, multiple dogs. This pattern is consistent with forced fighting, probably starting when he was still a puppy." She pointed to the chain abrasions. "These cuts go deep. He was restrained in tight spaces for long periods. Probably kept chained when not being trained or fought." Hughes looked up at Clara. "This dog was bred for one purpose: violence. Everything about his conditioning was designed to make him aggressive, unstable, dangerous. The fact that he's capable of trust at all is extraordinary." "Can you trace where he came from?" Jonathan asked. Hughes ran a scanner over Titan's shoulder. It beeped. "Microchip, but it's encrypted. Sophisticated operation. They knew law enforcement might try to track their animals." "Can you break the encryption?" "I can send it to someone who can, but that'll take time." Hughes drew blood, labeled the vials carefully. "DNA markers will be faster. There are only so many bloodlines used for fighting dogs in the Northeast. We can trace which breeding operation he came from." 3 days later, the results arrived. Hughes called Clara to the clinic. "The bloodline traces to 3 possible breeding operations in the Northeast," she explained, spreading documents across her desk. 2 are legitimate, registered, inspected regularly. The 3rd is suspected but never proven illegal. Want to guess which one? "Kraus," Clara said. Hughes nodded. The genetic markers match dogs recovered from facilities linked to his network. Not proof in court, but enough to establish probability. Clara studied the X-rays again. The documentation of Titan's suffering laid out in clinical detail. Each image was evidence of systematic cruelty. Each scar told a story of pain. "He's been fighting his whole life," she said quietly, "just like Michael fought to save them." Hughes leaned back in her chair. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" While Clara was at the clinic, the situation at the estate deteriorated rapidly. Robert, monitoring security feeds, noticed the black SUV had been joined by a second vehicle. The men inside weren't trying to hide anymore. They had professional equipment, cameras with long lenses, listening devices, obvious surveillance gear. Thomas reported that staff were being approached. Sarah, the young maid, came to him shaking. A man had stopped her at the grocery store, offered her $500 for information. "What does Clara Bennett do with the dog?" he'd asked. "How much time does she spend with it? Does she take it off the property?" Sarah had refused, frightened, but the message was clear. Kraus was gathering intelligence. Then Jonathan received a call from a board member. "Some questions have come up about your recent activities, Jonathan." "What kind of questions?" "Specifically regarding certain animal acquisitions. There are rumors circulating, ugly ones, about illegal dog trading operations." Jonathan's grip tightened on the phone. "That's absurd." "I'm sure it is, but investors are nervous. The stock dropped 2 points this morning on speculation alone. I'm advising you to address this quickly." When Clara returned from the clinic, she found Jonathan in his study, staring at financial reports with cold fury. "Kraus is spreading rumors," he said without preamble, "telling people I'm involved in illegal dogfighting operations. Business partners are getting nervous. My reputation is being systematically dismantled." Clara sat down across from him. "He didn't just want to humiliate you. He wanted to create a connection between you and his illegal operations that he could expose publicly at the right moment. Titan was planted evidence." "Exactly. He gives you a dog with a documented history of abuse. Waits. Then at the perfect moment, has authorities discover where Titan really came from. They raid the estate, find a fighting dog, arrest you for illegal possession and animal cruelty. Your reputation is destroyed." "Why now?" Robert asked from the doorway. Clara had already worked it out. "Kraus is preparing a major development deal. I saw it in the business section last week. $500 million waterfront project. He needs Jonathan out of the picture because Jonathan's company is submitting a competing bid." "So he planned to have me arrested right before the bid deadline," Jonathan said. "The deal falls to him by default." Clara stood, pacing. "He used that dog as a weapon twice. Once in the fighting ring, training him to kill. Once against you, as planted evidence. And 15 years ago, he killed my son to protect this same operation." Her voice shook with rage. "He destroys lives like they're nothing, like we're all just pieces in his game." Jonathan studied her for a long moment. "I can cut you loose. Claim ignorance about Titan's origins. Might save my business reputation. Is that what you're going to do?" "I'm considering my options." He stood, walked to the window. "Or I can help you take down Kraus. Risk everything I've built. Everything my grandfather built." The room waited. Jonathan turned back. "Do you know what Titan taught me? Watching him with you? Loyalty can't be bought. I've spent 50 years believing everything has a price. But you earned that dog's trust through patience and understanding, not power or money." He met Clara's eyes. "What do you need from me?" Over the next hours, they built their strategy. Robert would trace the surveillance team back to Kraus, establish the connection. Dr. Hughes would create a comprehensive timeline of Titan's injuries, expert testimony that would hold up in court. Clara would reach out to her underground network of animal rescuers. Others had to have evidence of Kraus's operations. Coordinated exposure from multiple angles would be harder to suppress. Then Clara made the call she'd been dreading for 15 years. "Detective Wright, it's Clara Bennett." Silence on the line. Then, "Clara, after all this time." Samuel Wright had investigated the shelter fire. He'd been the one to tell her they'd found Michael's body. He'd never believed the official story about accidental causes, but he couldn't prove arson. The case had haunted him into retirement. "I know who set the fire," Clara said, "and I can prove it. But I need your help." "I'm listening." She told him everything. Titan, Kraus, the network, the surveillance. Wright listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "I always knew Kraus was dirty, never had hard evidence. If you're serious about this, I'm in. And I know an FBI agent who's been trying to build a case against him for 3 years. Let me make some calls." That night, they gathered in Jonathan's study for a strategy meeting. Clara, Jonathan, Robert, Thomas, Dr. Hughes, Detective Wright, and FBI agent Lisa Patterson, a woman in her 40s with the focused intensity of someone who didn't give up easily. "We've been tracking Kraus's operations for years," Patterson explained. "Money laundering, racketeering, animal cruelty across state lines. But he's insulated. Shell companies, intermediaries, plausible deniability. We need direct evidence linking him to the operations." "Titan is that evidence," Clara said. "Possibly, but we'd need more. Documentation, testimony, financial records." They were finalizing the plan when the estate alarm triggered, sharp, piercing, cutting through the night. Robert was at his laptop instantly. "Security breach, south perimeter." The camera feeds showed 3 men approaching the kennel. They moved with military precision, dressed in dark clothing. One carried bolt cutters. Another had what looked like a tranquilizer gun. The third had a real pistol visible in a shoulder holster. "They're not here for Jonathan," Clara said, already moving toward the door. "They're here to eliminate the evidence." "Clara, wait!" Thomas called. But she was already running through the halls, down the stairs, out into the night. Behind her, she heard shouts, footsteps, Robert calling for security. All she could think was, "Not again. I won't lose another one. Not after Michael. Not after everything." She reached the kennel just as the first man cut through the fence. The man with the bolt cutters stepped through the opening he'd created, tranquilizer gun raised. His 2 companions flanked him, professional and efficient. They'd done this before. Titan was on his feet instantly, hackles raised, a low growl building in his chest. But he didn't charge. He positioned himself between the intruders and Clara, protective instinct overriding attack training. Clara stepped forward, putting herself directly in the line of fire. "You'll have to go through me." The lead intruder stopped, reassessing. He was mid-40s, scarred face, dead eyes. "Lady, walk away. This doesn't concern you. Everything about this dog concerns me. We have orders. The dog doesn't leave here alive." "Then I guess you'll have to kill me first." The man's finger twitched on the trigger. For a moment, Clara thought he might actually do it. Then Robert's voice cut through the darkness. "Lower your weapons. Now!" Estate security flooded the area, 6 men with firearms trained on the intruders. Robert stood at the front, his military training evident in his stance. The 3 men found themselves surrounded, outgunned, but the lead man didn't lower his weapon. "Kraus doesn't accept failure," he said. "We don't leave without completing the job." "Then you'll die here," Robert said flatly. "Your choice." A standoff. Weapons raised on both sides. Titan still growling, sensing the violence barely restrained around him. Clara's heart pounded, but she didn't move from her position. Then Jonathan walked into the kennel area. He was unarmed, hands visible, moving with calm deliberation. Everyone's weapons tracked him for a moment before returning to their original targets. "Tell Kraus I have everything," Jonathan said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who commanded boardrooms. "Every document, every transfer, every connection between Titan and his operations, all of it documented and in the hands of people he can't reach." The lead man's jaw tightened. "Tell him if he wants war, he'll get war," Jonathan continued. "But it'll destroy us both. Every dirty deal, every illegal operation, every buried secret, all of it exposed. His empire burns, mine burns, mutually assured destruction." He stepped closer, fearless. "Or he can walk away, right now, and we both forget this happened. His choice." The lead man pulled out a phone, made a call. The conversation was tense, mostly one-sided, Kraus doing the talking. The intruder's expression grew darker with each passing second. Finally, he hung up. "He wants to meet, tomorrow, neutral ground." He looked at Titan. "And he wants the dog brought as proof it's alive." "Absolutely not," Clara said. "Titan goes nowhere near that monster." "Then there's no deal." "Then there's no deal," Clara repeated. "I won't traumatize him again." Jonathan held up a hand. "Everyone lower your weapons. Slowly." The standoff dissolved gradually. The three intruders backed toward the fence opening. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., we'll send the location." They disappeared into the darkness. Robert immediately had his team sweep the property. The intruders were gone, but the threat remained. Within an hour, Detective Wright arrived with FBI agent Patterson. They set up in Jonathan's study, laptops and files spreading across every surface. "This is the break we needed," Patterson said. "Kraus reaching out for a meeting means he's worried. Worried people make mistakes." "He won't confess easily," Wright cautioned. "He's too smart for that." "We wire everyone," Patterson explained. "Audio and video. Surround the location with unmarked units. Jonathan and Clara meet with Kraus, get him talking about Titan's origins, his network, his methods. The moment he incriminates himself, we move in with arrest warrants." "It's risky," Robert said. "He'll have counter-surveillance. Could turn violent." "He could also be setting a trap," Thomas added. "Luring you to an isolated location to eliminate witnesses." Clara listened to them debate tactics and risks. Finally, she stood. "I need to talk to Titan." They let her go. She walked to the kennel where Titan waited, still agitated from the earlier confrontation. She sat down beside him, and he immediately moved close, pressing against her. "I know you can't understand words," she said softly, stroking his head. "But you understand intent. You understand feeling." Titan's dark eyes watched her. "Those people who came tonight, they work for the man who hurt you, the man who turned you into a weapon. We can stop him from hurting other dogs, from doing to them what he did to you." She cupped his scarred muzzle gently. "But only if you're willing to face him again. Only if you're willing to be brave one more time." Titan was quiet for a moment. Then he laid his massive head in her lap, his body relaxing against her. Clara felt tears on her cheeks. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. I won't let anyone hurt you again." She stayed with him for an hour, then returned to the study. "We'll do it," she said. "But my way. We bring Titan. We get Kraus to confess. And we end this." The plan crystallized over the next hours. The meeting would be at the abandoned warehouse in Newark, the same address listed for Elite Canine Solutions. Poetic justice. Jonathan and Clara would go in with Titan. Everyone would be wired. FBI would surround the location. "The risk is real," Patterson warned. "Kraus is smart and dangerous. This could go wrong in a dozen ways." Clara thought of Michael running into burning kennels. This is what my son would do. Face the monster to save the innocent. For what it's worth, Jonathan said quietly. You've changed my mind about loyalty. It's not bought. It's earned. You earned Titan's trust. You've earned mine. Dawn broke cold and gray over the estate. Clara bathed Titan carefully, speaking softly to him about what was coming. Thomas brought her coffee, his hands shaking slightly. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. For Michael. For every dog that died in that fire. For every animal Kraus destroyed. Margaret came to say goodbye, hugging Clara tightly. Robert checked and rechecked the surveillance equipment. Wright coordinated with Patterson's team. At 9:30, the convoy assembled. Jonathan's armored sedan, security vehicles following, FBI unmarked units maintaining distance. Titan sat calmly in the back seat beside Clara, his body alert but not aggressive. Clara noticed the change in him. He wasn't the terrified, rage-filled animal from 3 weeks ago. He was choosing to be brave because he trusted her. We survive this together, she whispered. The warehouse loomed ahead as they approached Newark. Gray, decrepit, its broken windows like empty eyes. Kraus's vehicles were already there. 2 black SUVs, professionally maintained, clearly expensive. The convoy stopped. Clara took a deep breath. Jonathan looked at her. Last chance to turn back. No, Clara said. We're ending this. Today. They exited the car. Titan walked beside Clara, his leash loose in her hand. Together they walked toward the warehouse entrance, toward a reckoning 15 years in the making. The door stood open. Darkness beyond. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, feel Titan's warmth against her leg. They stepped inside, and Victor Kraus was waiting. Victor Kraus stood in the center of the warehouse, bathed in dusty light filtering through broken windows. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and immaculate, in an expensive charcoal suit that looked absurd in the decrepit surroundings. 4 bodyguards flanked him, professional and alert. His eyes swept over Jonathan, dismissed him, then landed on Titan. He smiled. Impressive animal, Kraus said, his voice smooth and cultured. I trained him myself, you know. One of my finest projects. Clara's hands balled into fists. Titan pressed against her leg, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He remembers you, Clara said quietly. Of course he does. Muscle memory. Fear conditioning. Pain creates lasting neural pathways. Kraus spoke about it the way someone might discuss a particularly successful investment. That dog represents 18 months of precision work, bred from champion bloodlines, conditioned from 8 weeks old. Conditioned, Jonathan said. Interesting word choice. Kraus turned to him amused. What would you prefer? Trained? Taught? Let's not pretend, Jonathan. You wanted a weapon that looked like a pet. I provided exactly that. Except he was unmanageable. Yes, well, Kraus shrugged. Most don't survive the process. The weak ones die off during training. Heart failure, mostly. Or they simply break mentally and have to be destroyed. The stronger ones become exactly what we need them to be. Weapons. Clara felt rage rising in her throat like bile. This man was talking about systematic torture as if discussing a manufacturing process. And the Bennett shelter fire? Jonathan asked, his voice carefully neutral. Kraus's smile didn't falter. Unfortunate necessity. They were interfering with my operations, rescuing dogs that carried evidence, testifying in court, building cases. They had to be stopped. He glanced at Clara. I assume you're related? The resemblance to the woman who ran that shelter is striking. My son died in that fire, Clara said. Did he? Kraus seemed genuinely unbothered. Collateral damage. Regrettable but necessary for business continuity. That was when Clara saw his expression change. A flicker of awareness, then calculation. His eyes swept the warehouse again, this time really looking. The shadows weren't quite right. The acoustics felt wrong. "You're recording this," he said flatly. FBI agents emerged from the darkness. 6, then 8, then a dozen. Agent Patterson stepped forward, her weapon drawn but pointed down. "Victor Kraus, you're under arrest." Kraus laughed. Actually laughed. "You arrogant fool, Jonathan. You think you can trap me? I have lawyers who'll have this thrown out before you finish the paperwork. Illegal recording, entrapment, coercion. This will never see a courtroom." He pulled a gun from inside his jacket. Fast, practiced. One of his bodyguards moved to intervene, but Kraus had already aimed it. At Titan. "Evidence dies, case dies," he said. Everything happened at once. Titan's training kicked in. A gun pointed in his direction meant attack. His body coiled, muscles bunching, lips pulling back from teeth that could tear through bone. The growl that emerged from his chest was pure violence, the sound of 2 years of systematic abuse channeling into rage. Clara felt him preparing to lunge, saw the decision forming in his mind, attack the threat, eliminate the danger. "Titan, easy." Her voice cut through the chaos, calm, steady, the same tone she'd used for 3 weeks. "You're safe. I've got you." Titan froze. His body trembled, caught between 2 years of conditioning and 3 weeks of healing. The growl continued, but he didn't move. "Easy," Clara repeated. "You don't have to fight anymore." Kraus stared in disbelief. "Impossible. I programmed that response into his DNA. Threat equals violence. It's not something you can just undo." Clara met his eyes. "You programmed a puppy. You broke a baby animal and thought that made you powerful. But I reached a soul. I showed him that kindness exists. That's the difference between us." Titan sat, still trembling, still growling, but controlled, choosing trust over trauma. Patterson's team moved in instantly. Kraus's gun was knocked away before he could fire. His bodyguards were disarmed and on the ground in seconds. Kraus himself was pushed face first against a concrete pillar, hands cuffed behind his back. "Victor Kraus," Patterson said formally, "you're under arrest for racketeering, animal cruelty across state lines, arson, and murder. You have the right to remain silent." She continued reading his rights while other agents searched the warehouse. Robert had provided them with everything. Financial records showing the web of shell companies, veterinary evidence documenting systematic abuse, the recorded confession that had just taken place. Within hours, the operation expanded. Warrants were executed simultaneously at 12 locations across 4 states. Breeding facilities Kraus thought were hidden were raided. 217 dogs were recovered, most bearing the same scars Titan carried. As FBI agents led Kraus toward their vehicles, Clara stepped into his path. "My son died saving dogs you hurt," she said quietly. "He was 23 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. This is for him." Kraus's expression was cold. "You've destroyed nothing. I'm one person. Someone will replace me. This business is too profitable to die." "Maybe," Clara acknowledged. "But they'll know we're watching. They'll know that people like me exist who will never stop fighting. And every single time they hurt an animal, we'll be there to expose them, to rescue those animals. and to make sure they face consequences. She stepped aside. Kraus was loaded into a vehicle and driven away. 3 months later, Victor Kraus was convicted on all charges. The evidence was overwhelming. Titan's documented injuries, financial records, the confession caught on tape, testimony from dozens of witnesses. He received 25 years in federal prison. His network was dismantled. 47 people associated with the operations were arrested. The 200 dogs rescued were placed in rehabilitation facilities across the Northeast. Titan stayed with Clara. The adoption was formalized through Dr. Hughes's clinic. He lived at the estate in quarters Jonathan had renovated specifically for him. Not a kennel, a proper room with soft bedding, toys, and windows overlooking the gardens. His transformation continued. He was gentle with staff, protective, but never aggressive. Thomas often brought him treats, marveling at the change. "I was wrong about him," the butler admitted one afternoon, "and about what's possible with patience and understanding." Clara had found her purpose. The Bennett Foundation was established at the estate with a $10 million donation from Jonathan. Its mission: rescue and rehabilitate fighting dogs using trauma-informed care. It was named after Michael, so his death would save lives rather than simply ending one. Dr. Hughes served as medical director. Wright helped with investigations, tracing other illegal operations. The foundation took the dogs no one else would touch, the ones deemed too dangerous, too damaged, too far gone, and one by one, they healed them. Jonathan's transformation was almost as remarkable as Titan's. He'd spent his entire life believing wealth and power were the measures of success. Now he channeled resources into animal welfare advocacy, pushing for stronger laws and better enforcement. "Titan taught me loyalty can't be bought," he told a confused board member. "Clara taught me that justice is earned through action, not purchased through donations." His business associates didn't understand the change, but they respected the conviction behind it. On a warm afternoon 1 year after Kraus's arrest, Clara drove to Georgia. Titan sat in the passenger seat, calm and content. They arrived at a small cemetery outside Atlanta. Michael's grave was simple, a stone marker with his name, dates, and an inscription. He ran toward the fire. Clara knelt, placed fresh flowers. Titan sat beside her, his massive head resting gently against her shoulder. "I found him, baby," she said softly. "The man who killed you, and I made sure he'll never hurt anyone again." She stood, her hand on Titan's head. "You were right about everything. Hurt dogs sound angry, but they're really just scared. And the truth is scary, but hiding from it just makes the hurt last longer." She looked at Titan. "Ready to go home?" He stood, tail wagging slowly. On the drive back, Clara thought about the past year. The Bennett Foundation had rescued 89 dogs. 67 had been successfully rehabilitated and rehomed. The estate had been transformed, the kennels replaced with a proper rehabilitation facility. Titan served as their ambassador, proof that even the most traumatized animals could recover. Volunteers watched him interact gently with new rescues, showing patience with their fear, and they learned what was possible. Michael's death hadn't been meaningless. It had led to Kraus's exposure, to the network's destruction, to the foundation that saved lives daily. "I couldn't save you, Michael," Clara whispered. "But because of you, I saved him. And he saved me right back." That evening, Clara walked the estate grounds at sunset. Titan beside her, no leash needed. In the distance, other rescued dogs played in the rehabilitation yard, their trauma slowly easing under patient care. Staff members who had once feared Titan now greeted him warmly, scratching his ears as he passed. From his office window, Jonathan watched and smiled. Clara looked at Titan, remembering the terrified, rage-filled animal from 3 weeks ago. Remembering the moment she'd sat beside his kennel and hummed an old gospel hymn, remembering his choice to trust again. "People think broken things can't be fixed," she said quietly. "That trauma is permanent. The damaged creatures can never truly heal. But I've seen fighting dogs become therapy animals. I've seen billionaires learn compassion." Titan looked up at her, his dark eyes peaceful. "You weren't vicious," Clara continued. "You were scared, just like all of us when we're hurt. The question isn't whether someone can change, it's whether we're willing to give them space to heal." They walked together into the fading light, toward home, toward purpose, toward the work that would continue as long as there were creatures who needed saving. Because healing wasn't something you achieved once and finished. It was a choice you made every single day, to show up, to be patient, to believe that broken things could become whole again. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those broken things saved you right back. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.